welcome to this Local Time Machine Thursday. It's the first one that we're actually doing a interview for. And to celebrate this special occasion, we decided to do this interview with our colleagues from Finland, representing the first Finnish local time machine project that we have in our time machine community. And this project is called WarSampo. And it's a portal that is linked to an open data infrastructure on World War II history. And with me today, I have Eero Hyvönen. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah. Close enough.
Great. You are a professor at the Aalto University at the Department of Computer Science, and you also direct the Semantic Computing Research Group that specializes on semantic web technology and applications. And we also have Tomi Auranta with us from the National Archives of Finland. So welcome, and once again, thank you very much for taking the time. And I thought, since there is already a video available on the portal itself that explains quite practically and hands-on how to use this portal, and it's more like a tutorial showing potential users and researchers how to navigate the portal. I thought that maybe for this, for this introduction on WarSampo, we can dive a bit into the beginnings of the project and maybe touch a few topics that you find most important and remarkable to share with our community. So my first question is, my first question is, what does Sampo stand for? What does it mean?
Sampo name comes from the Finnish epic Kalevala, which is a national epic, and there in this epic there is this mysterious Sampo that everybody wants to own because it gives its owner riches and good fortune. And nobody really knows what it is. But it is the desire of everybody to have. And it has been the source of inspiration in Finnish art and literature and music, like Sibelius music is inspired by this Kalevala epic. So we decided to give this name to our Sampo portals and WarSampo as well.
Interesting. Well, that actually leads me to my first question, which is, I was wondering if, if you go back to the beginnings of the project, when you think back, can you remember what was your first thought or idea to start a project like that? What was, were the circumstances like back then? And what made you think, actually we have to start a portal like this. We have to get this information out there and yes, just provide a portal to do research on World War II. And how did you decide on the name also then?
Yeah, the name comes actually it's even older, because we have been working on this Sampo model and Sampo portals for 20 years now. Now we had a sort of 20 years birthday of Semantic in Finland meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we have been working on different portals in cultural heritage. And first Sampo with that name was actually Culture Sampo, which tried to sort of integrate all kinds of cultural forms in Finland, both tangible and intangible, into a very large semantic portal. And the Sampo name came actually from there, because we actually translated the epic Kalevala into linked data as a core of that system. And because we thought that this epic is very fundamental to Finnish culture, and it links everything together. So the Sampo name came from there. But then the war history work started in the 10 years ago. We had collaborations with the University of Colorado, Boulder, and they had an interesting data set about archives of World War I. And we decided to make a semantic portal based on that data. And the reason for that was that the centennial of the World War II was during that time. And we thought that this is now the right moment to try to make something very different in terms of war history. And then at the same time, also the Finnish centennial of independence was approaching in 2017. And we thought that now that we have practiced war history with the US people and the World War I data, we should do it with our own data. And the the Second World War data was very important and nice data sets in Finland. And at that time, we also made a connection with the National Archives, who have very rich collections of death records and war diaries and everything related to the Second World War. And then we started to collaborate with Tomi Ahoranta and also with many other organizations in Finland, like the Defense Forces. And it turned out, which was a surprise for me, that all this data was openly available. I thought that it's somehow secret or something like that, and or restricted for data privacy issues. But actually, we could deal with it very easily, and everybody seemed to be interested in joining the project. So we have lots of different data sets integrated into the infrastructure and the semantic portal and link data service. And it has been now online since 2015, but it has also been extended in several occasions with new applications and new data sets integrated into the knowledge graph. So it's evolving all the time.
Okay, I see. And what would you say is the key idea of WarSampo?
Well, the key idea was actually to reassemble the life stories of the soldiers, because we have linked data and we have lots of different data sources, and we wanted to provide the end user a view to the history based on these different data sources. So we suddenly realized that we had actually created 100,000 home pages for dead soldiers and some alive, some who also survived the war. And that was sort of the key idea or motivation. How can you do this automatically based on linked data? And WarSampo is a sort of demonstration that this can be done to some extent. So most of the people who are using WarSampo are actually using it for finding information about their deceased relatives. And based on the typical use cases that you are interested in your grandfather or something who died in the war. And based on that information, we can find out in what military units he served. And then based on the assumption that he served in that unit, then we can find lots of different events from the WarSampo ontology of wartime events and war diaries and everything related to that unit and person, photographs and so on. And in that way, we can sort of reassemble the story behind the individual soldiers. Most of the people in the WarSampo are those who died. So we have 95,000 dead people, everybody basically who was killed in action in Finland during the Second World War are there. But then we also have about 5,000 prominent Finnish soldiers, because they are also related to so many things in the ontology that we decided to take also them on board.
So this sounds like a very comprehensive and quite powerful portal when you want to do research for researchers, professional researchers, and also for laymen, I suppose. It's a freely accessible portal that anybody who would like to research on their family or more in a professional environment can access.
Yeah, we have two major user groups, I would say. The first one is of course, the laymen and family researchers who are doing research on their family members and so on. So it's used by the public, and it's very popular actually at the moment. So that we in Finland we have 5.5 million inhabitants, and 860,000 people have used actually the WarSampo portal. So I don't know where there are of course people also abroad that are using it, but it's basically Finnish content. So most of the people are from Finland. And in addition to this kind of public or layman kind of approach, we are now using it also for research, for studying some subsets of the WarSampo data. For example, the death records are used by digital humanities researchers, war historians, for analyzing who died when and why they died, or are there some different interesting patterns of dying in the war. So we are doing this kind of digital humanities research as well. So it's also targeted to researchers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you said you have different data providers, the National Archives of Finland being one of them, or being one of the first or the biggest one, Tommy, is that right? And who else are your data providers? Who else do you cooperate with?
The National Archives was at least one of the first to contribute with our data. The Military Archives of Finland had been collecting data on war casualties from 1980s, and when I met Eero for the first time in one event at Aalto University and heard of his vision about the WarSampo, I was thinking that we should absolutely be there and find out how we can utilize our data in new ways. And here we are now. After 6 years, the WarSampo has been a success, and we are happy to be part of it.
Excellent.
Yeah, there are also other major sort of data providers. The Defense Forces of Finland, they had a very nice authentic photograph collection of 160,000 photographs, and we interlinked and analyzed the captions of the images, and we could then link them to the units and people, for example, and places. Then we also had created an historical place ontology for the annexed areas of Finland. Finland lost the Karelia area, for example, to Soviet Union as a result of the Second World War. And then, for example, the maps that are now contemporarily used in that area, they are Russian maps, and they have changed, for example, names of places and so on. So it may be difficult for modern people to understand where these places are in Karelia area, for example, in the France. And so we got a data set from a private enthusiast of over 30,000 different geocoded places in Karelia area, and we integrated that into the system, and now we can show the events and so on the maps, and we also made a using the map purpose system of New York Public Library. We also sort of aligned old historical maps on top of Google Maps, so that you can see at the same time the historical maps and the current contemporary maps, and get a better contextualization of the events that took place there. Then we also had over 3,000 war memoirs from a magazine. After the war, people were eager to tell their experiences in the war, and there was a particular magazine that was published until 1986. That was written by the war veterans, and we got access to that data, and so we used language analysis again there and tried to link the articles that these veterans were telling and writing about their war memoirs into the other infrastructure of the system. So there are quite a few different data sets, and very different in nature as well, that we integrated in the system. And then there is one particular collection of the war cemeteries in Finland that we collaborated with the Finnish photographer associations. They went on and made thousands of photographs of these, over hundreds of war cemeteries in Finland, and we integrated that in the system. And since we know in what cemetery every casualty is buried, we can actually pinpoint the exact place where these people are buried. And this was a sort of very big hit actually in Finland. People got very interested in cemeteries, which was a little bit weird, I think. But still it was the custom in Finland that we didn't leave anybody in the front. So everybody basically who died, we tried to get them to the Finnish soil. So that was a decision by the sort of military people, even if it was not perhaps the wisest thing from a sort of military point of view. It was considered that everybody who gets killed there, we should get them from the fronts and bury them to their home cemetery. And that's why we have this unique war cemetery system in Finland. And yet another data set that we created with some veteran organizations was a data set about war prisoners that were captured by the Soviet troops. So there are stories of thousands of these people who were captured and were in Siberia and so on. And some of them returned to Finland after the war, but most of them didn't. they remained in the Soviet Union. So there are these kind of extensions then that can be created on top of the infrastructure. And I think this is the main thing here, that by creating this kind of infrastructure, we are able to reuse it in new data sets, and we don't have to start from scratch. And I would suggest that actually in Europe, similar kind of efforts will come sooner or later, because if you think of the Central Europe, everybody was fighting with each other, and here we are speaking about millions of casualties, and the data is distributed in different countries, represented in different languages, and if we want to create some kind of a global view of the World War II in Europe, then sooner or later this will happen, but it's too early, I think, because there are these Nazi problems and things like that in Central Europe. People don't want to remember at the moment. There are only some related systems in Holocaust, related to Holocaust, because it's something that people are allowed to remember, so to say, but not the ordinary war happenings. We didn't have this kind of problems in Finland, and that's why we could sort of, in a way, pioneer this area in Finland, because we had the data available and nobody objected of publishing and using it publicly on the web.
Mm-hmm. I see. That would have also been my next question. What you see for the future of WarSampo? Where do you think it can go? What do you think the next steps will be? And I suppose this vision of having similar portals all over Europe, because of course our history is connected, and discovering all these individual stories of with World War II casualties, to connect it all over Europe. Is that the road do you think WarSampo will take?
Well, we have done it now for Finnish materials, but I'm sure it will happen on a European level and in larger context. And there are some initiatives in Europe going on, like in the Netherlands. There's a big project, and even a kind of research center on publishing and digging into this data of casualties of the Second World War. So this is one direction. But then on the Finnish side, we have continued the work. As I mentioned, we have these new applications that have been published on top of the WarSampo, and they are actually included in WarSampo as new application perspectives. But then a couple of weeks ago, we just published with the National Archives yet another separate application that reuses the infrastructure. And it's a collection of 200 video memoirs of the veterans that were recorded by the veteran organizations in Finland. And we created a semantic viewing portal where you can actually view the videos as it goes on, and since we know what's happening there in the video based on the textual descriptions of the videos and timestamps, we can actually give the viewer context for the story. So, for example, when a veteran mentions a city in Karelia area, we can automatically link that part of the video to additional information about that place or person in WarSampo or in Wikipedia as well, because we also link our data to Wikipedia and so on. So WarSampo is actually part of the Link Open Data Cloud, the international effort. It's one bubble in the bubble sea, if you have seen the bubble picture of the Link Open Data Cloud. So in that way, the things get larger and larger, and the linking gets gradually larger and larger. One thing that's perhaps worth mentioning here as well is that now we have dealt with linked depth, so to say, mostly. And it would be very nice to continue this work to more people who survived the war. Like my father was a veteran, and he's not, of course, in the WarSampo because he survived. And we are dealing mostly with the casualties of war in that system. So, but this is a huge. We have basically the data. We could do it, but it would cost because there are something like 200 or 300,000 people who would be involved in this kind of system, and this would be a major effort. But it will perhaps happen in Finland sooner or later once we get some funding and people who are interested in doing that.
Yes, the funding is always an important aspect
yes.
of projects like that, right?
Yeah, we had difficulties in getting funding. I thought that this would be an easy piece of cake to fund because the independence centennial of independence was approaching, but little did I know. So, but we finally managed to actually combine this kind of work to other IT business-oriented projects that we had as a use case, because everybody wanted to see how the semantic web technologies can be used in systems like this, and the companies were interested in funding our work as well, and then also the funding organizations, because they saw that this is something that is also interesting from the business point of view, and now that's why we got then funding for this and major funding so that we could do it.
Well, I would say thank you very much for this short introduction, and I would like to invite our viewers to go ahead and try out WarSampo themselves. And I suppose if they have any questions, well, they can always contact us or contact you. Yes, and I would say let's leave it at that. Right.